"That old shed really ought to be torn down, Ma," Lucas said, squinting toward the back of my yard like the sight of it offended him. "It's lowering the value of this place." That was the moment I knew he was getting too close, too bold, too confident, and like every man who ever underestimated an old woman, he had no idea how wrong he was. I'm Gloria Matthews. I'm 65 years old, a retired nurse, widowed for nearly 20 years, and the mother of one beautiful daughter. I've spent most of my life taking care of others, patients, neighbors, my church folks, my family. But the hardest thing I've ever done was watch my only child marry a man I knew was dangerous, and then pretend like everything was fine. Lucas, my son-in-law, is a man of appearances. Charming smile, expensive watch, smooth voice, the kind of man who gets handshakes from pastors and compliments from realtors. But I saw past all of that from the very start. Maybe it was the way he looked at Alana like she was something he'd already owned, or the way he talked too much at dinner but never really said anything. Or maybe it was just a mother's instinct, that quiet little voice whispering, "He's not safe." The first year they were married, I tried to speak up. I told Alana I had concerns. I asked if she was happy. She brushed me off, said I was being overprotective. "He treats me like a queen, Mama," she said. I remember thinking, queens still get locked in towers. I've seen too many women ignore the signs. In the ER, I've bandaged their bruises, listened to their excuses. I tripped, I fell, it's nothing. I've walked them to the car while they smiled with cracked lips and trembling hands. But when it's your own daughter saying she's fine, while her eyes beg you to keep asking, it tears you in half. So I made a choice. I stopped arguing, and I started preparing. But a few days ago, something happened that I can't shake. I had gone over to drop off a casserole. Just a simple Tuesday morning, no occasion. Alana looked tired, her hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Lucas was home working from the couch," he said, though I didn't see a laptop anywhere. He asked Alana for coffee. 5 minutes later, I heard the crash. I rushed in to find the mug shattered on the hardwood and Alana flinching. "It's too weak," he growled. "What the hell is this? Water with a hint of bean?" She tried to explain, quietly, gently, but he was already standing, towering over her. "Maybe if you weren't so damn stupid, you'd learn how I like it by now." That was it. I stepped between them. "Lucas, enough," I said, steady and calm but sharp as glass. "You do not speak to her like that." He turned to me, eyes narrow, smile gone. "And you," he spat, "you crusty old thing, you don't belong in our house, meddling in our business. Maybe if you'd raised her right, she wouldn't be such a damn disappointment." I took a breath. "Say one more word and I swear I'll—" He shoved me, hard. I hit the arm of the couch, pain blooming in my ribs. Alana gasped. But then she turned on me. "Mama, please just go, you're making it worse." Her voice cracked, but it wasn't anger, it was fear, desperation, confusion. She was trying to protect me, or him, or both. I don't know anymore. I picked myself up slowly, didn't say a word, just walked out the door with my heart in pieces. So when he stood in my yard today, pointing at the shed with that smirk, talking about value and curb appeal, I smiled. Because that shed has everything. That shed knows him better than he knows himself. I started turning it into something useful 2 years ago. Cleaned out the rusted tools, brought in a safe, set up lighting. It became a sanctuary, a quiet war room. I started collecting audio, photos, emails, every little piece of truth he tried to bury. He never suspected a thing. And now, as he rattled on about property lines and landscaping, I stirred my sweet tea and watched him talk. "Some things are meant to stay put," I said. He didn't understand. They never do. But one day soon, he would. And when that day came, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I wouldn't need to plead or beg or explain. I'd just hand over the truth and let the truth do what it always does, tear down the liars, brick by brick. If you felt this in your bones, tap like and drop your city in the comments. You might not be watching this alone. 2 days after Lucas tried to tear me down with his words and his hands, I woke up before the sun, like I used to back when I worked double shifts at Grady Memorial. There's something about the early hours that makes everything clearer, the quiet, the stillness, the way shadows stretch long and slow across the floor. That morning, I didn't sit with my coffee on the porch like I usually did. I went straight to the shed. The key turned with a soft click, and I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. It smelled like cedar and paper, comforting, familiar. I switched on the little desk lamp and looked around. The safe sat beneath the workbench, bolted to the floor. The filing cabinet was neatly labeled. The second-hand laptop I used for backups blinked to life. This was my place, my protection, my proof. I pulled out a folder labeled Lucas, Verbal Threats. Inside were printouts of transcripts from recordings, sorted by date. One of the latest ones was from a Sunday dinner 2 weeks ago, where he'd told Alana that her baby fat made her look unprofessional in front of his colleagues. Her voice had trembled when she laughed. I didn't laugh. I added a fresh note at the top. July 14, kitchen incident, shoved me into couch, called Alana stupid, coffee too weak. Alana begged me to leave. Then I plugged in my flash drive and transferred the latest recordings from the brooch cam, one that captured that entire cursed morning. His tone, his language, the smack of ceramic hitting the floor, the silence afterward. It still burned in my chest. Not the shove, not even the insult, but Alana's voice, begging me to go, the way she looked at me like I was the problem. I know she doesn't mean it. Not truly. She's been chipped away, piece by piece, until she doesn't know where she ends and Lucas begins. That's how men like him work. They isolate. They shame. They twist the world around their victim until up feels like down, and down is still somehow their fault. But not my girl. Not forever. I closed the laptop and sat back, hands in my lap. On the small shelf above me sat my old nurse's bag, weathered leather, still smelling faintly of antiseptic. I used to carry that bag into rooms filled with pain, and I'd bring calm, order, relief. It made me feel useful, capable. Now, I carried relief in another form, truth. The only thing left was time. Later that morning, I got a call from Alana. Her voice was thin, tired. "Hey, Mama. You okay?" I paused. "I'm all right, baby. Just a little sore." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "He's been stressed. Work stuff. It's not an excuse, I know, I waited. I wish things were easier." "Easier doesn't mean better," I said softly. "And love doesn't mean pain." "I know," she said. But she didn't mean it. Not yet. "Still," she called. "That was something. I brought you some groceries," I said. "Left 'em by your porch. You don't have to open the door." She was silent a moment. "Thank you." Before she hung up, I said, "Alana, remember who you were before all this. That girl still lives inside you." I didn't expect a reply. I didn't get one. That afternoon, I stopped by church. Not for service, it was Tuesday, but for the quiet. The sanctuary was empty, sunlight filtering through stained glass like melted jewels. I sat in the back pew and closed my eyes. Prayed not for strength I had that, but for wisdom, for timing. On my way out, I saw Pastor Lewis sweeping the front steps. "Miss Gloria," he smiled, setting his broom aside. "Lord, it's been a minute. Everything all right?" I gave him my church lady smile. "Oh, you know, just keeping an eye on the world." His smile faded just a little, like he could see the weight I carried but wouldn't ask. He'd always been good like that. "If you ever need anything," he said gently, "you got more than God's ear. You got mine." I squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Reverend." That night, back at home, I made myself a strong pot of chicory coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. I pulled out my small red notebook, the one I never let out of my sight, and started mapping everything out. Lucas's patterns, his outbursts, his moments of silence because those too told a story. His bank statements, his phone calls late at night, the new name I'd found on the life insurance policy. There were dots waiting to be connected, and I was getting close. But close wasn't good enough. Not yet. I looked out the window, past the azaleas, to the shed bathed in moonlight. He wanted to tear it down. One day soon, he would try. And when he did, he'd find more than dust and old boxes. He'd find me, waiting, and I wouldn't be alone. The first sign that Lucas was circling came on a Thursday afternoon, quiet and sticky with heat. I was shelling peas at the kitchen counter, the radio humming low with an old Sam Cooke song, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I don't usually answer those, but something told me to. Miss Matthews, a man said, voice careful, professional. This is Harold Price. I manage Bayline Storage on Jefferson. My hand stilled. Yes, I said. What can I do for you, Mr. Price? There was a pause, the kind people take when they're choosing their words. I just wanted to confirm no one else is authorized to access Unit 317, correct? No one, I said, already standing. Why? Well, he cleared his throat. A man came by earlier today asking questions. Said he was your son-in-law. Claimed you'd sent him to clear out some old things. The room felt smaller. What did he look like? I asked, though I already knew. Tall, well-dressed, confident. Too confident, Harold said. Didn't have the key, got irritated when I said no. Left, but... Another pause. I figured you should know. I thanked him, promised to stop by tomorrow, and hung up. Lucas had found the shed, not by accident. He'd been sniffing around my life for months, asking Alana what I kept back there, making jokes about junk, about how I was stuck in the past. Men like him don't tolerate closed doors. Secrets offend them, especially when they don't control what's behind them. I wiped my hands on a towel and sat down slowly. This was the shift. The moment when observation turned into action. That evening, Alana came by. No call ahead. Just a soft knock at the door. Hesitant, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. When I opened it, she stood there with her purse clutched tight and a bruise blooming yellow along her wrist. My chest tightened. I just needed to get out, she said. Just for a minute. I stepped aside. Come in, baby. She sat at the table, staring at nothing. I poured her a glass of iced tea the way she liked it, extra lemon, no sugar, and slid it toward her. Our fingers brushed. She flinched. Did he hurt you again? I asked quietly. She shook her head too fast. It was my fault. I grabbed his arm when he was leaving. I didn't argue. I'd learned better. Instead, I said, someone came by the storage unit today. Her head snapped up. What? Lucas, I said. He tried to get in. Her face drained of color. He said you told him to clean it out. He said you were finally letting go. I met her eyes. Did you believe him? She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. He said it was just old things, she murmured. That you were being dramatic. Did he tell you why he wanted in so bad? She shook her head. Because what's in there, I said gently, is the truth. She swallowed. Mama, I'm not asking you to choose, I said. Not today. I'm just telling you this, whatever he's afraid of back there, it's not junk. She didn't respond. But when she stood to leave, she hugged me. Tight. Desperate. That night, I drove to the storage facility myself. The air inside was cool, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Harold met me halfway down the aisle. I changed the code, he said quietly, and I flagged the unit. Thank you, I said. You did the right thing. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, heart steady. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. I checked the lock, the safe, the cabinet, untouched. But the feeling lingered. Back home, I made calls. First, to my lawyer, Denise Carter. We'd gone to college together, marched together, buried husbands months apart. She listened without interrupting. He's escalating, she said when I finished. You're doing right documenting everything. But Gloria, you need to be ready. I am, I said. Then I called Pastor Louis. Then my neighbor, Mrs. Franklin, who never missed a thing and believed in community the way folks used to. By the time I went to bed, I had a plan. Lucas showed up 2 days later, unannounced. Again. This time, I didn't open the door right away. I watched from the window as he paced the porch, jaw tight, smile gone. When I finally stepped outside, he straightened, smoothing his shirt like a man preparing for battle. We need to talk, he said. About what? I asked. You keeping secrets, he snapped. About poisoning Alana against me. I laughed softly. That only made him angrier. You think you're smarter than me, he said, hiding things. That shed, I said calmly, is none of your business. He stepped closer. Too close. You don't get to decide that. I looked him dead in the eye. Watch me. For a second, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he smiled. Cold. "You're going to regret this," he said. "Old women who meddle always do." I watched him leave without a word. Then I went inside, sat at my table, and wrote down every word he'd said. Because the truth was no longer just waiting. It was knocking. The morning after Lucas threatened me on my own porch, I rose with a weight in my chest that wouldn't leave. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was something heavier. Like standing in the middle of a battlefield you didn't choose, but knowing you couldn't walk away. I made my coffee stronger than usual chicory, a splash of cream, and took it to the back porch, where the azaleas were starting to bloom in defiance of the August heat. From where I sat, I could see the shed, still standing, still quiet, still mine. But I knew better than to get comfortable. Lucas was moving, and I needed to stay one step ahead. Around mid-morning, I got a call from Denise. Her voice was brisk, clipped. "He's hiring a private investigator," she said. "I caught wind of it through a contact in Fulton County. He wants dirt on you." I closed my eyes. "Let him look." "Gloria," she warned. "You need to be careful. If he finds anything at all, you know he'll twist it." "I'm clean," I said. "And I've got a hell of a lot more on him than he'll ever have on me." She sighed. "Then it's time we start building the official case." That afternoon, Denise came over with a scanner, a notepad, and a folder thicker than a Sunday roast. We set up in the kitchen, two old women in our 60s, one retired nurse and one tenured attorney, preparing for a war most folks would call invisible. We cataloged everything: timestamps, voice recordings, copies of bruises, text messages. Denise examined each file like it was a loaded gun. She didn't ask how I got half of them. She didn't need to. "What's the end goal?" she asked quietly, halfway through the afternoon. "Safety," I said, "and truth." She looked at me for a long moment. "And Alana?" I hesitated. "She's in there somewhere," I said, underneath the silence and the fear. "But she's not coming out unless she knows someone's got her back." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, watching the driveway. At 2:17 a.m., a car rolled by slow, too slow. A black sedan, lights off, engine low. I wrote down the time. The next morning, I installed motion sensors around the shed and upgraded the lock. I ordered a solar camera from the Home Depot website and scheduled Mrs. Franklin's grandson to come set it up. I knew how this worked. Lucas wasn't going to break the door down with a crowbar. No, he'd chip away at my credibility first, paint me as unstable, emotional, a meddling, lonely old woman with a vendetta. That was fine. I'd been underestimated before. At church on Sunday, I kept my smile warm and my eyes sharper than ever. I watched Lucas put his arm around Alana like a trophy, whisper something in her ear that made her laugh too loud, too forced. I watched as he shook hands with the deacon, nodded at Pastor Louis like he actually cared about anything other than appearances. Then I watched him see me. He froze for just half a second, then smiled. I smiled right back. After service, I caught up with Alana in the parking lot while Lucas talked to the men's group. She looked tired again, worn thin. "Still drinking tea with no sugar?" I asked, handing her a bottle of water. She smiled weakly. "Yeah." Cutting back. I nodded. "You ever think about cutting out more than sugar?" Her eyes flickered. "Mama." "Just a question." She opened the water, took a sip. "I'm scared." "I know. I don't know who I am anymore." I put a hand on her shoulder. "You're still in there. I see you. You just need to believe me when I say he's not the only one with power." She blinked fast, swallowed, then said nothing. When Lucas came back, she stepped away like I'd burned her. I didn't take it personal. Pain makes people retreat. Fear makes them obedient. But truth waits. That evening, I made one more stop Bayline Storage. Harold met me with a nod. Still no activity, but I've got eyes on it. I walked down the row and unlocked the unit. Inside, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I recorded a video. I sat down in front of the camera, adjusted the angle, and looked straight into the lens. My name is Gloria Matthews. If you're watching this, it means I'm no longer here to say it in person. I laid it all out: dates, names, patterns. I told the truth, plain and unpolished. Not for the courts, not even for Alana, but for history, for justice. I closed the recording with the same words I'd told Alana once. If you're wondering whether love should hurt, no, baby, it shouldn't, not like this. Then I saved the file, labeled it Final Truth, and locked it in the safe. Outside, the evening air was thick with storm clouds. Something was coming, but so was I. 3 days later, it happened. The moment I'd been waiting for, the moment I'd been preparing for. And like most storms, it didn't come with lightning first, it came with silence. That morning started soft. The kind where the sky looks half awake and the birds don't even bother singing yet. I had just finished my second cup of coffee and was folding laundry when the power went out. Everything stopped: the hum of the fridge, the ceiling fan, the gospel music on the radio. It was the middle of summer in Georgia. Power outages happen. But something about the timing, the precision of it, made my skin crawl. I looked out the front window. Streetlights still on, neighbor's porch fan still spinning. It wasn't the grid. It was me. I walked to the back door, slowly, quietly, and stepped onto the porch. The shed stood still across the yard, its silhouette sharp against the early light. But something was wrong. The padlock was gone. My heart dropped into my stomach. I moved faster than I had in years, barefoot through the dew-wet grass, heartbeat like thunder in my ears. The door to the shed was ajar, swaying gently. I stepped inside, and I froze. The safe was pried open. Papers scattered everywhere. The laptop was gone. My red notebook, the one with every detailed note, was missing. I sank to my knees, hands trembling, eyes darting across the floor, trying to make sense of it. He'd been here. Lucas had broken in. Somehow, he'd cut the power, bypassed the camera, cracked the lock. He had everything. For one long, terrible moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I heard it: car tires, slow and soft on gravel. I rushed out of the shed just in time to see a black sedan pull away down the street. License plate covered. He'd come and gone before breakfast. I ran inside, checked the solar camera footage. Nothing. He'd disabled it. I called Denise. He took it all, I said, voice shaking. Everything in the shed. He broke in. She didn't miss a beat. We have backups. Don't panic. He took the originals, the physical evidence. We planned for this. You gave me a copy 2 weeks ago. That laptop I picked up last time, it has all your files, Gloria. Relief hit me like cold water. I sat down hard on the kitchen floor, the phone shaking in my hand. You think he knows? I asked. He probably thinks he's won, she said. That's good. Let him feel safe. That evening, I called Alana. I need you to come home, I said. Alone. She hesitated. Why? I just need to see you. Please. 2 hours later, she showed up, nervous and fidgety, a hoodie pulled tight despite the heat. I didn't waste time. He broke into the shed. Her eyes widened. What? Lucas. He took everything. Or so he thinks. Her hands flew to her mouth. Oh my God. I reached over and held her hands in mine. Baby, listen to me. Everything I've done was to protect you. I've been building a case for over a year, and now it's ready. She blinked. A case? Yes, for court, for safety, for freedom. Her lip trembled. What if he finds out? What if he hurts you? I'm not scared of him, I said. And you don't have to be either, but you do need to decide what comes next. She didn't answer. Instead, she asked the question I'd been waiting to hear. What do you need me to do? I took a deep breath. I need you to wear this. I handed her a tiny pin, a camera. Don't let him know. Record everything. I know it's asking a lot, but we need more. We need him saying it. She stared at it like it was a weapon. And in a way, it was. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. That night, I barely slept. Part of me wanted to run, to hide, to rip up every paper and disappear into the woods. But the other part, the stronger part, sat in my kitchen, staring at the empty teacup where Alana had rested her hands. I was done being afraid. Lucas had drawn first blood. Now it was my turn. The storm had arrived, but I was ready to walk through it. The first recording came 3 days later. Alana showed up just after dusk, her face pale, eyes wide, fingers trembling around the tiny camera I'd given her. She didn't say a word when I opened the door, just stepped inside, handed it over, and collapsed into one of my kitchen chairs. I poured her a glass of water. Was it bad? I asked. She nodded, slow, worse than usual, but he talked. I took the camera and plugged it into my laptop. We sat in silence as the video loaded. The screen flickered to life with a blurry view of their living room, dim lighting, wine glasses on the coffee table, Lucas pacing. His voice filled the room. "You think your mother's not dangerous?" he snapped. "She's manipulating you, Alana. She's trying to tear us apart. She's probably got lawyers, files, who knows what else hidden in that damn shed." Alana's voice came through, soft, hesitant. "She's just worried about me." "She's obsessed with control," Lucas barked. "Always has been. You think it was an accident your dad died the way he did? You really think Gloria Matthews is some harmless old widow?" The air in my kitchen went cold. He kept going. "If she pushes me too far, I'll push back. I've got insurance too. And don't think I won't use it." There was a silence in the video. I could hear Alana's breathing. Then Lucas laughed low, cruel. "I could ruin her, you know, with one phone call." He said more. Not everything was clear, but it was enough. I closed the laptop, heart pounding, hands clenched. Alana looked up at me, tears brimming. "I'm so sorry, Mama." I moved around the table and wrapped my arms around her. "No, baby, you were brave." She clung to me like a child, and I held her like I used to when she'd scrape her knees or wake up from bad dreams. "This is it," I whispered. "This is the start of the end." The next morning, Denise came over. We played the recording twice, taking notes, marking timestamps. "This is solid," she said. "Threats, accusations, defamation. It paints a very clear picture." "What now?" I asked. "Now we file. But we're doing it carefully, quietly. We'll serve him with a restraining order first, then press charges if needed. You'll need to testify." "I'm ready." Denise looked at Alana. "And you?" Alana swallowed hard. "He'll come after me." "I'll protect you," I said. "Every second." "I'm not leaving my house," she added. "Not yet." Denise nodded. "That's your call. But if you stay, you'll need more recordings, conversations, proof he knows what he's doing." Alana's shoulders squared. "I'll get them." That evening, I sent her home with another PIN camera, a voice recorder in her purse, and a burner phone. I kissed her forehead at the door and whispered, "Don't be afraid of him." She whispered back, "I'm not anymore." But I was, not for myself, for her. That night, I couldn't sleep again, so I cleaned. I scrubbed the kitchen floor, dusted every shelf, rearranged the pantry, anything to keep my hands busy, my mind spinning. Around midnight, the house phone rang. Only 2 people ever use that line anymore, Alana and the church. I picked up. "Miss Matthews?" a deep voice asked. "This is Officer Caldwell with the Fulton County Sheriff's Office." My chest tightened. "Yes? We received an anonymous call earlier tonight regarding possible elder abuse at your residence." "What?" "The report claims verbal aggression, isolation, erratic behavior. We're required to follow up in person. Someone will stop by tomorrow morning." I stood there, stunned. It was him, Lucas, trying to flip the narrative, make me the villain. I thanked the officer, hung up, and sat down slowly. I knew this tactic well. Turn the system on its head, weaponize concern, paint the woman as unstable, bitter, vindictive. He was playing the long game. But he didn't know who he was playing against. The next morning, I was ready. I'd printed every file, labeled each folder, set out character references from Pastor Louis, my neighbors, even the director of the hospital I'd retired from. When the officers arrived, I invited them in with grace and a fresh pot of coffee. They asked questions. I answered, calm and clear. They looked at the documents. They took notes. They nodded. When they left, one of them lingered. "Off the record," he said quietly. "We've seen this kind of thing before. You're doing everything right." I closed the door, exhaled, and locked it behind me. Lucas thought he could use the law against me. But the law was already listening, and soon it would speak. It was strange, the way the quiet returned. After the officers left and the door clicked shut behind them, I expected more noise, more chaos, more retaliation. But nothing came. Not the next day. Not the day after that. Lucas went silent, which made me more nervous than anything else. "I don't trust the stillness," I told Denise over the phone that Thursday. He's planning something. He probably thinks his little stunt backfired, she said. He's regrouping. Let him. But I couldn't. Not when my daughter still slept beside him. Not when I didn't know what his next move would be. Then, just as the weekend arrived, Alana sent me a message. He's hosting a dinner Sunday. A few friends. Wants me to play hostess. I think he's trying to make things look normal again. Can you wear the mic? I texted back. Her reply came quick, already charged. I stared at her words a long time. Brave girl. That Sunday, I parked down the block from their house. Not to spy, just to be close, just in case. Through the blinds of my car window, I saw their porch light flicker on. Guests arriving, laughter, clinks of wine glasses, the illusion of joy. But inside, the storm was brewing. Late that night, close to midnight, Alana came to me again. Pale, her hands trembling, but eyes sharper than I'd ever seen them. I got it, she whispered. We loaded the audio file together. What we heard sent ice through my veins. Lucas, laughing. You know, if Gloria keeps pushing, I might just have to make a little call to Adult Protective Services again. Just spice things up. More laughter. Then, she thinks she's building a case. Poor thing doesn't realize I've got the DA's ear. Went golfing with him last week. One word from me. His voice changed then. Colder. If she doesn't back off, I'll bury her in court. Financially, socially. I've done it before. You think she's the first old hag who tried to get in my way. The recording ended. Silence sat heavy in the room. Alana looked at me. He's dangerous. Yes, I said, and now we can prove it. We forwarded the audio to Denise. Within an hour, she called back. We have what we need, she said. It's time. The next morning, Denise filed for a protective order against Lucas on Alana's behalf. She submitted the audio, the prior reports, witness statements from neighbors and co-workers who had started to whisper about Alana's bruises. Everything we had, laid bare before the court. By Tuesday, the judge signed the emergency order. Lucas would be served within 24 hours. But we didn't get that far, because Lucas found out first. I was walking to the mailbox when I saw the car again. Black. Same one from before. But this time, it didn't drive past. It stopped. Lucas stepped out. No smile. No charm, just rage in every line of his body. You think you're clever? He hissed, striding toward me. I didn't flinch. It's done, Lucas. The court knows. Your threats are documented, your words recorded. There's no more hiding. He stopped inches from me, fists clenched. You ruined everything, he said, low and sharp. No, I said. You did. The moment you raised your voice. The moment you raised your hand. The moment you decided fear was easier than love. He stared at me, chest heaving. Then, from behind me, a voice rang out. Step away from my mother. Alana, standing on my porch, phone in hand, recording. Lucas froze. Then, slowly, he stepped back, got in his car, slammed the door, drove off without another word. I turned to Alana. She was shaking, but she stood tall. I'm staying here, she said. I'm not going back. And I nodded, because now, finally, the line had been drawn. The silence was over. The reckoning had begun. The house felt different with Alana in it. For the first time in years, her suitcase sat at the foot of her old bedroom, still smelling faintly of lavender and the lotion she used in college. I walked past the doorway that night and found her curled up on the bed, not asleep, but resting, her eyes half closed, the expression on her face somewhere between peace and grief. I didn't say anything, just stood in the hallway for a minute, watching my child breathe without fear. The next morning, the news came. Lucas had been served. The deputy left the documents at his workplace, the financial firm downtown, where everyone wore suits and secrets. The papers were crisp, official, stamped with the weight of the state. It meant he could no longer approach Alana, speak to her, contact her in any way. It should have felt like a victory. But when I looked at Alana across the breakfast table, her face told another story. You okay? I asked gently, pouring her coffee. She nodded, but the motion was tight, uncertain. I thought I'd feel free, but I don't. You've been living in his world for so long, baby. Of course it's going to take time. She picked at her toast. He texted my best friend, told her I was unstable, that you've brainwashed me. I sat down across from her, and what did she say? Alana looked up, eyes watery. She blocked him, called me crying, said she was sorry for not seeing it sooner. I reached out and squeezed her hand. The truth has a way of revealing itself, in time, just like roots pushing through concrete. Later that day, we met Denise at the courthouse to begin preparing for the formal hearing. Lucas hadn't filed a response yet, but we knew it was coming. He's quiet now because he's calculating, Denise warned as we walked down the echoing hallway. Don't mistake that for surrender. I don't, I said. I've seen that kind of silence before. While Denise filed paperwork, Alana and I sat in a waiting room full of bruised women and broken men, all clutching folders or staring blankly at the floor. I saw myself in every one of them, in the way they held their stories close, in the exhaustion behind their eyes. I can't believe how many people are here, Alana whispered. This system isn't broken, I said softly. It was built this way, like it's designed to wear you down. Yes, I nodded. But we're still here, and we're not alone. That night, back home, I made chicken and dumplings the way my mother used to when the world felt like too much. Alana ate 2 bowls, and for a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to sneak biscuits before dinner. We cleaned the kitchen together, laughing quietly over old stories. But just as I was putting the last dish away, her phone buzzed. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and froze. It's him, she said. Don't answer. I'm not. It's just a missed call. But look, he left a voicemail. I took the phone and hit play on speaker. Lucas's voice came through, calm and measured. Too calm. Alana, he began, I don't know what lies your mother has told you, but you need to understand this isn't over. You're making a mistake. We can fix this. But not if you keep hiding behind Gloria. There was a pause. Then his voice darkened. You think you're safe, but I know where she lives. I know where she keeps everything. Don't push me, baby. You don't want to see what I'm capable of. The message ended. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Alana whispered, He's going to come here. I looked her dead in the eyes. Let him. I called Denise immediately and sent her the voicemail. She promised to file for an escalation of the protective order in the morning, along with criminal charges for the threat. But I knew the paper wouldn't stop him. That night, I checked the cameras, every lock on every window, the bat I kept behind the door. I slept in the armchair by the front door, just in case. At 3:12 a.m., I heard a noise, soft, barely there. I stood, heart hammering, and crept to the back door. The motion light blinked on. A shadow moved past the shed. I didn't hesitate. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch. Lucas, I called out into the darkness, voice firm. I see you. Silence. Then footsteps fast, heavy retreating through the bushes. I didn't chase him. I went back inside and called the sheriff. By 3:30, a deputy was taking a statement on my front porch. He didn't try to enter, the deputy said, but we'll flag the report and increase patrols. Will that keep him away? Alana asked, standing behind me. The deputy hesitated. We'll do our best, ma'am. After he left, I turned to Alana. This is it, I said. We've got to go public. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean press, social, community. We shine a light so bright, he can't hide anymore. You and I, we tell the truth. I don't want to be a victim in a headline. You won't be. You'll be a survivor in a movement. She didn't answer right away. Then, finally, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Let's show them who he really is. The morning after Lucas tried sneaking around the shed, I put on my Sunday dress not because it was Sunday, but because I needed to feel like a woman who didn't flinch when the world pushed back. I chose the navy blue one with the pearl buttons, the same one I wore to my husband's funeral and again when Alana graduated college. I needed its strength. Alana sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone, shoulders tense, hair pulled back tight like she was preparing for battle. You sure about this? She asked, voice hoarse. I poured my tea. Baby, I've been sure for a long time. The question is, are you ready to speak? She swallowed hard. I don't want to be ashamed anymore. Then we do it together. We reached out to Pastor Louis first. He came over that afternoon, wearing his faded gray suit and the weight of 30 years of counseling folks through heartbreak, addiction, and forgiveness. We told him everything: the abuse, the threats, the break-in, the voicemail. He didn't interrupt, just listened, eyes heavy with sorrow. When we finished, he placed a weathered hand over Alana's and said, "You don't have to carry this alone anymore, child." Then he turned to me. "And you, Sister Gloria, you've been fighting this war with more grace and courage than most men ever muster. Let's bring this story into the light." Within 24 hours, Pastor Louis arranged a closed-door meeting with a few trusted members of the congregation, people who held influence in the local community, who believed in truth even when it made them uncomfortable. At first, it was quiet, just a living room full of people with soft gasps and lowered eyes as Alana spoke, her voice trembling, but steady. She told them about the bruises, about the fear, about the way Lucas made her feel small in her own skin. And then she looked at me. And I was too afraid to listen to my mama, too ashamed to ask for help. I reached across and held her hand. When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then Sister Mavis, an old choir alto who didn't take mess from anybody, stood up and said, "That man ain't walking into our sanctuary again, not with what we know now." It was the first crack in the wall. By the end of the week, the whispers had become conversations. Conversations became concern. Concern became action. Alana and I wrote an open letter. We sent it to the local paper, the church newsletter, and eventually hesitantly posted it online. It told our story in our own words. No embellishments, no drama, just truth. The headline read, "When silence protects the wrong man, a daughter and her mother speak out." The piece went viral in our small-town way. Hundreds of comments, shares, phone calls, messages from other women. Men, too. People who'd lived in the same kind of shadow, who finally saw a piece of themselves in our pain. One message came from a woman in Atlanta. She wrote, "Lucas dated my sister 10 years ago. She left with a broken arm and never told anyone why. Thank you for speaking." Another came from a former co-worker of his. He always made offhand comments about putting women in their place. We thought it was just him being him. "I'm so sorry." I printed every message and taped them on the fridge, a growing wall of witness, a reminder we were not alone. "But Lucas?" He exploded. "We didn't see it firsthand, but Denise called. He filed a motion this morning," she said, her voice tight. "Defamation. He's claiming the article and the post are libelous. Wants you both to take it down immediately." I laughed, bitter. "He's really playing the victim now?" "He wants control," Denise said, "but he just made a mistake." "How so?" "He filed in civil court. That means discovery. And now, we can subpoena his records." I looked over at Alana. "You ready for this?" She didn't blink. "Let's peel back the mask." We got to work. Denise dug into Lucas's financials, his professional conduct, his past relationships. She filed a motion to admit the voice recordings, the security footage, the signed witness statements from neighbors who'd seen him sneak around our property. And then we found it. A sealed report from years ago filed by an ex-girlfriend in college. Assault, never prosecuted, but documented, buried under his family's money and a well-paid university lawyer. It was the crack we needed. We added it to the case file. By now, the court date was set. 1 week. 1 week until I'd sit in a wooden chair, raise my right hand, and speak truth into a room that might not want to hear it. But I would, because silence wasn't an option anymore. Not for me. Not for Alana. And not for the women who came before us and never had the chance to speak at all. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold air conditioning. I'd been there a dozen times over the years, jury duty, community meetings, once to testify for a neighbor's custody battle. But today, as I walked through those doors with Alana beside me, it felt like the building was holding its breath. We were early. Denise was already inside, seated at the table up front, her briefcase open like a soldier's satchel, files stacked with precision. She glanced up and gave us a nod, the kind of look that says, "This is it. No turning back now." Alana squeezed my hand. "You sure you want to testify?" she asked. I looked her in the eye. I've never been more sure of anything. Lucas arrived 20 minutes later, flanked by his lawyer, a smug man in an expensive suit, face like a man who never had to lose. Lucas wore a navy blazer, no tie, eyes sharp and calculating. When he saw us, his lips curled into something between a smirk and a warning. I held his gaze. He looked away first. The judge entered, and everyone stood. She was a small woman, maybe in her 60s, with gray hair pinned neatly and glasses low on her nose. She reminded me of a retired schoolteacher, but the moment she began to speak, her presence filled the room. This is a preliminary hearing regarding the restraining order and civil defamation suit filed by the plaintiff, Lucas B. Whitaker, she said. The court will hear both sides and determine whether the matter should proceed to trial. Lucas's lawyer stood and launched into a polished speech about reputation, career damage, and unfounded attacks made via social media and small-town gossip. He used words like malicious and reckless, painting Lucas as a victim of personal vendettas and public humiliation. Alana sat perfectly still beside me, but her jaw clenched. Then it was our turn. Denise stood, adjusted her blazer, and spoke like only a woman with truth on her side could. "Your Honor," she began, "this case isn't about social media or gossip. It's about protection, about a woman who feared for her life and a mother who stepped in when no one else would." She laid out the evidence like bricks in a foundation: voice recordings, security footage, bruising photos, timestamps, the voicemail where Lucas threatened to bury me. Then she asked to call her first witness. Me. I walked to the front, my knees stiff but my back straight, swore to tell the truth, sat down, looked the judge in the eye. "Mrs. Matthews," Denise began gently, "can you tell the court why you believe Mr. Whitaker poses a threat?" I cleared my throat. For years I watched my daughter shrink in his presence. I saw bruises, excuses, fear in her voice. I offered help, but she wasn't ready, so I waited. And when she came to me shaking, scared, I did what any mother would do. I protected her. I looked over at Lucas. He stared back, jaw tight. I started collecting proof. He threatened me, broke into my shed, tried to destroy evidence. Even after the protective order, he came back. That's not the behavior of a man who feels wronged. That's the behavior of a man who's afraid his power is slipping. Denise nodded. "Thank you." Then Lucas's lawyer stepped up. "Mrs. Matthews," he said, oozing condescension, "is it true you've never liked Mr. Whitaker?" "I never liked the way he treated my daughter," I said plainly. "Is it also true that you recorded private conversations without consent?" "In Georgia," I replied, "only one party needs to consent, and that party was me." He blinked. "So you admit you were actively spying on your daughter's marriage?" "I was documenting abuse. There's a difference." He tried a few more angles, suggesting I had a vendetta, that I was manipulating Alana, that this was a personal crusade against a man who simply didn't want a meddling mother-in-law. But I didn't budge. After I stepped down, Denise called Alana. Watching her walk to the witness stand made my heart ache and swell all at once. She looked fragile but determined, like a candle that refused to flicker. "Miss Whitaker," Denise said gently, "can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" Alana took a breath. "It started like a dream," she said. "Lucas was charming, attentive, successful, but once the vows were spoken, everything changed. He started small criticism, isolating me from friends. Then came the yelling, the threats, the physical stuff." She paused, hands clenched in her lap. "There were nights I didn't know if I'd wake up to another bruise or just not wake up at all. I was scared to leave, scared no one would believe me. But my mother, she never gave up. She gathered proof. She risked everything." Denise nodded. "Why did you post the letter online?" "Because I needed people to know. I needed to stop hiding, to stop protecting him." Lucas's lawyer tried to rattle her too, asked if she ever hit him, if she ever lied. Alana looked him dead in the eye and said, "No, but I was lied to every day." After testimony ended, the judge recessed for deliberation. It felt like forever. Then she returned. "I find the plaintiff's claims of defamation unsubstantiated," she said clearly. "There is compelling evidence of abuse and harassment. The restraining order is hereby extended to 12 months. The civil suit is dismissed." I closed my eyes, exhaled. Alana reached over and held my hand, tight. Lucas stood, face red, but silent. For once, he had no power in the room. As we left the courthouse, Denise whispered, "This isn't the end, but it's a start." and for the first time in years, I believed her. There's a peculiar kind of silence that settles after a courtroom victory. It's not peace, not quite, more like a breath held between storms. A pause where your body relaxes but your soul remains cautious, glancing over its shoulder, waiting for the next ripple. That was how the house felt the morning after the hearing. Alana sat at the kitchen table sipping her coffee, eyes on the backyard, where the shed door was finally locked with a reinforced deadbolt. The wind moved through the tall oak like a gentle warning. "Feels like we climbed a mountain," she murmured. "But the clouds still look heavy." I understood what she meant. We'd won a battle, yes, but Lucas was the kind of man who didn't retreat quietly, and we were still living on the edge of his reach. Denise had warned us of that. "Restraining orders don't stop people. Consequences do," she'd said. "You need to keep documenting, keep the public engaged. Visibility is your shield now." So that's what we did. We joined a local advocacy group called Stand Still No More, an organization for women who had survived domestic abuse and wanted to change the systems that failed them. They invited us to speak at a small gathering held in a community center just outside Atlanta. The night before the event, I sat at my desk, trying to write what I wanted to say, but words wouldn't come. So instead, I opened the old red notebook Lucas had stolen from the shed and I'd later recovered, tattered now, but sacred. I flipped through the pages, each one a moment of truth I'd written down in secret. The time I saw Alana hiding makeup to cover her jawline, the receipt from a hotel stay Lucas had paid for under another woman's name, the words he shouted at me when I dared to speak up. It wasn't just a notebook. It was a testament. At the event, the room was modest but full. Women of all ages, a few men, some in business clothes, others in sweatshirts, and grief. There were children playing quietly in the corner, laughter echoing off brick walls scarred with time. Alana spoke first. She stood behind the microphone, shaky at first, but grew stronger with each word. "I used to think love meant sacrificing yourself for someone else's comfort," she said. "But that's not love. That's fear dressed up in hope." The audience leaned in. She told them about Lucas, about the control, the silence, the moment she chose to leave. Then she stepped aside and nodded to me. I stood, took a deep breath, and told them the truth. "I am not a hero," I said. "I'm just a mother who got tired of waiting for the world to care about my daughter." I spoke about watching abuse from the outside, how helpless it makes you feel. About the whispers in church pews, the denial at family dinners. About how people say, "Mind your business," until someone ends up buried. The room was silent. I ended with this. Justice isn't always a bang of a gavel. Sometimes it's a whisper from one woman to another saying, "I believe you." That's where it starts. The applause was soft at first. Then it swelled. Afterward, people came up to us, hugged us, cried with us, shared their own stories. A woman named Carla said her sister was trying to leave an abusive marriage but didn't know how. We gave her Denise's card and our burner number. A man in his 60s said he'd witnessed his own mother go through something similar and never forgave himself for not doing more. We drove home in silence, but it was a different silence, one filled with purpose. But the next morning, that peace cracked. A knock on the door, firm, measured. I opened it to find a man in a black jacket holding an envelope. "Are you Gloria Matthews?" "I am." "You've been served," he said, handing it to me and walking away. I opened the envelope slowly, dread pooling in my gut. Inside was a lawsuit. Lucas was suing for damages, again, but this time it was personal injury claiming emotional distress and public humiliation caused by the rally and our online presence. "Are you kidding me?" Alana said, reading over my shoulder. "He lost in court. He's just trying to wear us down." "Exactly," I nodded. "It's not about winning, it's about exhausting us." We called Denise. She sighed. "This is called SLAP, Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. Abusers use it to silence victims who speak publicly. We'll fight it. And now we have grounds to turn this into a counterclaim." "But how long will it drag out?" Alana asked. "As long as he has money and spite." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, thinking about how justice wasn't just about courtrooms, it was about endurance, about outlasting the darkness until it ran out of breath. I remembered my mother once told me, A woman's strength isn't in how loud she shouts, it's in how long she can hold her ground when the earth shakes. The earth was still shaking, but I was still standing, and I wouldn't move. Not now. Not ever. Morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen blinds, cutting sharp lines across the tabletop where Alana and I sat with 2 mugs of chicory coffee and a stack of mail between us. After the lawsuit notice from Lucas, our world had shrunk down to 2 things: strategy and survival. We were buried in paperwork, court filings, deadlines every day like a new wave crashing against us. "I got a call from the local news station," Alana said, her voice low, eyes cautious. "They want to interview us about the advocacy talk and the lawsuit." I set my mug down, fingers tightening around it. Public exposure is a double-edged sword, but people deserve to know the truth. "We can control the narrative," she added, a flicker of determination in her eyes. We both knew she was right. That afternoon, we met with Denise and a local journalist named Karen, who had made a name for herself reporting on community justice issues. Karen was focused and empathetic, not the kind who turned pain into spectacle. Over 3 hours in my living room, papers spread like a battlefield map. Karen asked questions that went beyond violence in courtrooms. She asked about what it felt like to lose trust, to fight quietly while the world watched, and to rebuild a life out of fragments. When Karen left with her recorder, she told us, "I'll do right by your story." I believed her. 3 days later, the interview aired during prime local news right before the evening headlines. I was nervous, but I sat beside Alana on the couch that night, holding her hand as the story began with our faces and voices on screen. In a small Atlanta community, a mother and daughter have taken their story of domestic abuse and legal battle to the public eye, sparking conversations about protection, justice, and community responsibility. Seeing our lives condensed into that single narrative was surreal, painful, but powerful. The response was immediate. Texts, phone calls, messages from survivors thanking us for shedding light, from friends offering support, from neighbors asking what they could do. But not all responses were encouraging. A message popped on my phone that night from someone I didn't recognize. "Be careful. He's dangerous when cornered." That was it. No signature. I showed it to Alana. "She's right," she said. "Lucas can't let this go quietly." I nodded. The next morning, I made an appointment with a security consultant named Terry, a retired detective who now ran private risk assessments for high-profile cases. I wanted layers of protection we hadn't even thought about yet. Terry arrived at 10 a.m., his gait slow but sure, eyes scanning every corner like he was memorizing invisible exits and angles. "You've been through a lot," he said, shaking my hand. "But the fact that he's escalating legally and making threatening comments tells me this isn't just about reputation, it's about control." He recommended cameras, motion sensors, panic buttons, and an emergency safe room setup in case things got worse than just a shadow in the yard at night. I absorbed every detail without flinching. Later that afternoon, Teresa Franklin, our neighbor, steadfast friend, and unofficial house guardian brought over a basket of fresh cornbread and greens, just like my late mother used to make. "You two look bone-tired," she said, hugging me. "You sit down and eat before it gets cold." We talked like neighbors do about weather, about church services, about how the azaleas needed trimming. Teresa asked about Lucas once, and when I answered, she didn't flinch. She nodded, grave. "He's a storm," she said. "But storms don't last forever." Her voice hit something inside me, not optimism, but resolve. That evening, I got another call, this one from Alana's old college friend, Marissa. She was concerned. She said Lucas had reached out to her again, trying to worm his way into her trust. She blocked him, but she was scared. That was the moment it hit me. Lucas wasn't just after me and Alana anymore. He was isolating every connection, every ally. And that pattern wasn't random, it was deliberate. I called Denise right away. "He's trying to dismantle every support system you have," I said. "That's classic," she replied. "The more isolated a victim is, the more dependent they become. Lucas learned from the pattern you documented years ago." "Exactly," I said. "We need to build a network," she said. "Friends, community leaders, allies who can testify to his behavior and character patterns. People who knew him before he met Alana." I thought about that for a moment. Then I called Pastor Louis. He didn't hesitate. I'll gather anyone who can help. And then I called Karen. I want to do a follow-up interview this time with voices from the community, I said. She said yes. By the time dusk fell, my living room was a war room again, plans, contacts, and support webs spread across every available surface. As I turned off the lights and made my way to my bedroom, Alana passed me in the hallway, her face steady. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" I wondered. "For helping me find myself again." We both paused at that silent intersection of past hurts and future battles. And for the first time in weeks, the stillness wasn't tense. It was purposeful, because every step we took now was toward something bigger than fear or retaliation. It was toward justice measured, communal, and unrelenting. And we were ready. We didn't know exactly when it happened, only that one day we woke up and the world seemed to tilt just a little bit closer to justice than it had before. The morning dawned warm and still, almost deceptive in its quiet. Most people would have sipped coffee, checked the weather, talked about mundane things. But Alana and I had other priorities. We moved through the house with a cautious optimism, like we were hoping the walls would hold up under the weight of everything we'd built. By 9 a.m., the phones were buzzing. Not the anxious, worried kind of buzz, this was different. Messages from supporters, from survivors whose lives had been touched by our story, and even a few from folks who said they'd never experienced abuse themselves, but felt compelled to speak out. One message stood out. It was from someone I didn't know personally, but the words hit deep. "You have inspired me to leave. Thank you." I read it aloud to Alana, who was sorting through the day's mail at the table. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of fear, they were tears of hope. "That's why we're doing this," she whispered. By mid-morning, I had a call scheduled with the volunteer coordinator for a women's shelter in downtown Atlanta. They wanted to host a joint event where survivors could share their legal experiences and offer resources to others who were still trapped in silence. "We want to give them a voice," the coordinator said, "and your story is powerful." My chest swelled with something I hadn't felt in a long time, pride mixed with purpose. We hung up, and I turned to see Alana staring at me. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, though her eyes seemed distant for a moment. Then she said, "I think this is our chance to help beyond ourselves." She was right. We spent the rest of the morning drafting a proposal, outlining what we wanted to say, who we hoped to involve, and just as importantly, what resources we wanted people to walk away with. Then Denise called. "We've got an update on the slap case," she said, her voice brisk but excited. "The judge has ruled in our favor. The motion to dismiss has been granted, and the court has sanctioned Lucas for filing a frivolous lawsuit meant to silence you both." I blinked. For a moment, disbelief wrapped around my heart like a cold hand, and then relief rushed in, warm and unrelenting. "That means his tactics are now recognized as intimidation," Denise continued, "and it strengthens our position in the civil proceedings." I didn't even have to look at Alana to know how she was feeling. Her breath hitched just a little half relief, half disbelief. "That's good," she said softly. "That's really good." "It's more than good," I said. "It means truth still has power." Later that afternoon, we met with Pastor Lewis, Teresa, and a small group of community leaders at the church. The idea was to plan the shelter event and to talk about how our story could be a catalyst for a broader movement against domestic abuse and legal intimidation. The room was warm, filled with familiar faces, some worn with their own battles, others new to our journey but eager to help. Teresa looked at me with steady eyes. "You're doing the right thing," she said. "You're turning pain into protection." And I realized she wasn't just talking about Alana and me. She was talking about every woman who ever suffered in silence, whose fear kept her voice trapped in her throat. We left the church with plans in motion, dates on the calendar, and a sense of community rallying around us that we hadn't anticipated. That evening, as I was locking up the house, the mail slot rattled. I reached down and pulled out a letter official, typed, crisp. My heart thudded just reading the header. Office of Victim Services, State of Georgia. I opened it slowly. It read, "In recognition of your contributions to raising awareness of domestic abuse and legal retaliation tactics, you and Ms. Whitaker are hereby invited to speak at the statewide Victim Advocacy Conference this fall." I felt my breath catch. Alana came up behind me. "You got something?" I handed the letter to her. Her eyes widened, then softened. "We're making waves," she whispered. I nodded. "Yes, we are." But that night, long after the lights were out, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was worried, but because my mind wouldn't stop turning. Lucas had lost his lawsuit. The community was behind us. Opportunities to help others were growing. The shelter event, the conference, it all pointed to momentum. But momentum can be dangerous. It draws attention. It stirs reactions. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. I sat up, heart pounding, and saw a message from Pastor Louis. "Can we talk tomorrow?" Urgent. I didn't wait. I called. "Pastor?" "Gloria," he said, voice measured. "I just got off the phone with the sheriff. There's been unusual activity near your property. Cameras triggered at odd hours. Nothing conclusive yet, but they want to make sure you're aware." I closed my eyes. There it was again. That feeling. The storm wasn't over. It was evolving. But so were we. I whispered to the stillness of the house, "We won't back down." And I meant it. The week after the statewide conference invitation came in, a strange heaviness settled over our home like weather before a storm. The air felt thicker. The trees in the yard seemed restless, their leaves trembling even when there was no breeze. I noticed it first before dawn, when the house was still and quiet, and it stirred a memory I hadn't thought of in years. The Sunday afternoon years ago when I first saw Lucas with Alana in my kitchen and knew something was terribly wrong. That same knowing, that same unease, rose up in me again like I was standing at the edge of something I'd been preparing for my whole life. I woke before sunrise, poured a cup of chicory coffee, and walked to the back porch to watch the sky shift from gray to gold. I didn't speak. I just breathed and waited. I was patient because that's what this story had taught me, that truth didn't rush. It revealed itself when the moment was right. By 8 o'clock, Alana was already in the kitchen making breakfast, scrambled eggs with chives, toast, the whole quiet Sunday ritual. It should have felt comforting, normal, but every time I glanced at her, I saw a shadow there, a reminder of what they had both endured and what still might lie ahead. I took a bite of my egg, sipped my tea, and tried to focus on the present. There were bills to pay, paperwork to sort, calls to return. The mundane was a refuge, or at least it used to be. Now it felt like breathing underwater, necessary, but weighty. The phone rang, a shrill sound that sliced through the quiet. "Gloria Matthews?" It was Detective Ramirez. I knew his voice. He'd been assigned to monitor the increased activity around our property. "Yes," I said, bracing myself. "We have something," he said, deliberate and calm. Not a break-in this time, but recorded movement from one of the perimeter cameras, time-stamped at 3:17 a.m. 3 nights ago. My stomach dipped. "Do you have footage?" "We've got clips," he said. "I'll send them to your attorney, and we'll coordinate next steps." I hung up slowly. Alana looked up at me. "What did he say?" I showed her the concern in my eyes. "He said someone was near the property," I said. "At 3:17 a.m. 3 nights ago." Her face tightened. "He knows we're pushing back," she said. "And he's scared," I replied. We didn't speak much after that. The space between us was a kind of quiet strategy, thinking, planning, watching. By noon, Denise had called. "We received the footage," she said. "It's not clear yet, but we're enhancing it. If it's who we think it is, this will strengthen our case significantly." That afternoon, we met with Pastor Louis and Terrence, the security consultant. The footage hadn't been released publicly yet, but the fact that someone was moving around the property in the middle of the night was undeniable. "You're doing the right thing by documenting," Pastor Louis said, "and you're not overreacting. This is serious." "I know," I said. "But it's not just about fear. It's about evidence. And he's giving it to us." That evening, we gathered at the community center for the planning meeting about the women's shelter event. The room was filled with volunteers, survivors, advocates, people who'd been touched by domestic violence in one way or another. They sat in folding chairs, hot cups of coffee in hand, faces both weary and resolute. I stood in front of them with Alana by my side. "We have to be visible," I told them, "not because we want attention, but because fear thrives in silence." I could feel their eyes on us like warmth. People nodded, whispered agreements, clenched fists in solidarity. Then someone asked the question every survivor fears. What if speaking out makes it worse? I looked around the room. "It already has," I said. But the alternative, staying quiet, only gives power to fear. We speak because we want change. We speak because we want protection. And we speak so the next woman doesn't have to build her case in the dark. The applause was quiet at first, and then stronger, steady, unwavering. After the meeting, Pastor Louis pulled me aside. "There's strength in this community," he said. "Don't forget that." "I won't." That night, I walked out to the shed slightly nervous, admittedly, but with a purpose. I checked the locks, the camera angle, the motion sensors, the panic button under the workbench. Everything was as it should be. And then I stepped back inside, back to my home, back to the warmth of lights, the quiet comfort of family, and the knowledge that even when the world feels heavy, truth is a force of gravity that can't be denied. Just before bed, I sat beside Alana on the couch. "You did good today," I told her, voice soft. She didn't look at me at first. Then she smiled, small but real. "We're making progress," she said. "Yes," I agreed. "We are." But as I turned off the light and made my way upstairs, one thought lingered. He was still out there, and I would be ready. The sound came just after midnight, sharp, singular, and unmistakable in its intent. Glass breaking. I was asleep in the armchair by the front window, the panic button lit on the small wooden table beside me. I didn't even have to think. My body moved before my mind did, feet on the floor, hand on the button, breath low and steady, eyes fixed on the dark yard. Then it came again, this time louder, closer, like someone was testing the limits of our peace instead of the strength of our patience. I didn't hesitate. "Alana," I whispered through the darkness, not shaking, not afraid, but alert, a mother, a survivor, a woman shaped by a lifetime of seeing trauma and standing steady through it. She stirred. "What?" she murmured, voice groggy. "Stay down," I said, calm, measured. "Don't look. Just stay down." I pressed the button. Within seconds, I heard the distant wail of a siren. The glass had shattered in the shed. Not the house. Not our windows. The shed. That old fortress Lucas once mocked. Now the first battlefield. I grabbed the flashlight by the door spotlight ready and stepped onto the porch. The sky was ink black, the grass silvered with moonlight, and the shed, once solid and closed, had a jagged crack in its wooden panel, like a mouth rattling open into the dark. I didn't walk. I advanced, step by step, slowly, purposefully. Inside the shed, splintered boards littered the floor like unwanted memories. I flashlighted every corner, every nook and hidden space until I found it. The safe. Still locked tight. Still waiting. That's when the deputy pulled up. Blue lights pulsing against the trees like impatient lightning. "Stay right there," he said through his megaphone. "We've got it from here." I exhaled like a woman who had been holding breath for years. The next morning, we met with the sheriff and Detective Ramirez at the station. He showed me the footage, grainy but telling. A figure, tall, unmistakably male, crouched by the shed moments before the glass broke. The silhouette matched the posture we'd seen dozens of times. Lucas's gait, Lucas's hesitation, Lucas's hands too quick to approach what wasn't his. "That's not just intimidation," Ramirez said. "That's escalation." And he was right. I felt a cold turn in my chest, not fear, but resolve. Because escalation meant we were close to the endgame. A predator pushed into a corner either surrenders or it fights. Lucas was fighting, with desperation as his weapon. Back at home, I showed Alana the footage. Her face was pale, but her eyes, those eyes that once flickered with uncertainty, now burned with clarity. "He's losing his control," she said. "That's why he's desperate." I nodded. "Fear tightens its grip when someone realizes they're losing power," I told her. "But truth gets stronger as it spreads." That afternoon we met with Denise, who was already preparing the next legal move. "This changes everything," she said. "There's probable cause for attempted forced entry. We can file an assault charge alongside the ongoing civil case." I felt a familiar emotion well up, cautious satisfaction. Not triumph, not relief, just truth waiting to be acknowledged. That evening, we spoke with Pastor Louis at church. He placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Your courage doesn't just protect your daughter," he said. "It inspires others to stand." I didn't cry. But for the first time in a long while, my heart felt unburdened in a way I can only describe as gentle strength. A week later, the local paper ran the story. "Shelter attacked. Advocate safe haven, targeted in midnight incident. Comments poured in. We support you. Stay strong. Thank you for shining a light. Not all were kind, but most were. And for the first time, I felt the community standing beside us, not behind us. That night, after the house was quiet, I walked out to the shed again. Reinforced boards lined the broken spots. New locks gleamed in the moonlight. The doors closed firmly, no cracks, no gaps, no shadows. I laid my hand against the wood, not like someone afraid of its history, but like someone who finally understood its purpose. This was never just a shed. It was proof. It was resistance. It was legacy. I turned back toward the house, where lights glowed softly through the windows. Inside, Alana was reading, curled with a blanket. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her at peace, something she hadn't known for years. And I thought of all the women who had told me their stories, women who had whispered their fears into empty rooms, women who had believed they were alone. And I realized we weren't just fighting for justice. We were fighting so that no one ever had to be silent again, because silence had a cost. And truth? Truth was worth every battle. The morning after the glass-breaking incident was quiet, too quiet. The air seemed suspended, as if the world was holding its breath in anticipation of what was coming next. When I stepped out onto the porch with my first cup of chicory coffee, the yard was still. The sun had barely risen, and I half expected to see that black sedan parked at the curb again, but the street was empty. Alana was already awake when I got back inside. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, eyes focused, fingers tapping softly. I poured her a cup of tea and set it beside her. "Morning," I said, trying to make my voice sound relaxed. She didn't look up. "Morning," she replied, not looking away from the screen. I knew that look. Determination mixed with unease. "Big day?" I asked gently. She exhaled softly. "I'm going to send the interview to some advocacy networks," she said. "I think it's time we widen the circle beyond Atlanta." I nodded, proud of her but cautious. "Just be mindful of how much you share." She paused, considering the words. "I will," she said finally. We moved through the day like two soldiers preparing for another front calm on the surface, but beneath it our nerves were humming a quiet warning. By mid-afternoon, Denise called. "We've got a court date," she said, brisk and efficient. "The judge has set the hearing for the attempted forced entry and harassment. It'll be in 2 weeks." My heart thudded in a rhythm that felt familiar. Slow, anchored, ready. 2 weeks, I repeated. "Use the time wisely," she said. "We need every bit of testimony, every witness, every piece of evidence solid and prepared." I thanked her and hung up. Alana exhaled in a way that sounded almost like relief. "It's happening," she said. "Yes," I said, "and we're ready." That evening, we gathered with Pastor Louis and a few leaders from Stand Still No More at the church's fellowship hall to talk strategy. The room was long and filled with vinyl chairs, some neatly arranged in rows, others pushed back in clusters where people sat and talked quietly. I saw familiar faces, those who had stood beside us at the shelter event, at community meetings, at the courthouse, people who believed that surviving was only the beginning. Pastor Louis stood at the front, hands folded, his voice a steady calm in a world that felt increasingly chaotic. "There are moments in our lives when silence is no longer an option," he said. "When we must stand and speak, not just for ourselves, but for those who cannot yet speak for themselves." I thought of all the women who had sent messages late at night, women who wrote about fear, isolation, shame, and the courage it took just to breathe. I thought of the message that had meant so much to Alana. "You have inspired me to leave. Thank you." I thought of the ripple effect truth could have when it was finally spoken. After our planning meeting, Teresa, which is what everyone called Mrs. Franklin, walked me to my car. "You've got grit," she said, her voice warm but solemn. "Don't let anybody dim that." I smiled at her. "I won't." "Good," she said, "because some folks don't like birds when they sing too loudly." I laughed, a light sound that felt good in my chest. "Then we'll just have to make sure our song can't be ignored." 2 days later, the footage from the shed incident had been enhanced by the sheriff's department. They had images not perfect, but clear enough to show the crouched form of a man near the shed at 3:17 a.m. The posture, the height, the gait, it matched Lucas's build. Detective Ramirez called to let us know. "You're doing the right thing," he said, voice steady. "We'll be adding this to the evidence for the upcoming hearing. The DA is taking this seriously." I thanked him. He didn't need to hear that this wasn't just about one motion or one man anymore. It was about all the women whose stories had never been heard. That night, I sat with the enhanced footage on loop, taking notes, marking timestamps, preparing every detail to ensure we weren't leaving anything to chance. And then I wrote a message to the volunteers who'd helped document community testimonials. "Tomorrow night we meet at 7. Bring your stories. We stand together." It was simple and direct, truthful and necessary. That night, I slept with the light on. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew the coming days would require all the strength and clarity I could muster. Morning came, and with it, a crowd began to form outside the church. A group of survivors, advocates, friends, neighbors, people who had come to say, "We believe you. We support you." As I stood in front of them, I felt the weight of years of silence fall away. I took a deep breath and began to speak. "Our stories don't end where the pain begins," I said, voice firm. "Our stories end where we reclaim our lives." And the crowd echoed back, quiet at first, and then louder, in support, in solidarity, in strength. We were not alone. Not then. Not now. The courthouse was surprisingly quiet that morning, almost deceptively so. It was the kind of stillness that felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something monumental to either break or be broken. Alana and I pulled into the familiar parking lot, the autumn sun slanting long shadows across cracked pavement. The air was crisp, but not yet cold, just enough to make the sky look impossibly clear, like it had nothing in common with the tension knotting my shoulders. Denise was already inside, reviewing pages of testimony with her sharp pencil tapping against the table like a heartbeat. Pastor Louis and Teresa were sitting in the front row, faces steady and supportive. The room felt protective, like an old quilt wrapped around us. The judge called the courtroom to order. Today wasn't about the protective order anymore. Today was about Lucas's attempted forced entry and harassment charges, the culmination of months of fear, evidence, and truth spoken without apology. We were ready. The prosecution began by laying out the surveillance footage. There was the timestamp, 3:17 a.m., the night Lucas shattered the glass at the shed. The enhanced video showed a tall figure, crouched and deliberate. The DA walked the jury through frame by frame, highlighting posture, movement, and matching it to the recorded timeline of Lucas's cell phone records. I watched as his lawyer shifted in his seat. I felt a flicker of something unfamiliar hope. Then Denise stood and began her direct testimony. "On the night in question," she said, voice precise, "the defendant breached the perimeter of the Matthews residence, resulting in property damage and heightened fear for the safety of Miss Pan, Matthews and her daughter, Miss Whitaker." She spoke clearly, methodically, without heat but with undeniable force. When she sat, it was my turn. I took a deep breath and started at the beginning. The first time I noticed something was wrong, that feeling in my chest, the way a mother just knows. I spoke about the gradual changes in my daughter, the bruises I saw and documented, the way fear can wrap itself around a person like a glove, tight and unseen. I watched the jury. They listened. Their eyes didn't wander. Their hands weren't restless. They were present. It felt like truth in motion. But then came the defense. Lucas's lawyer stood and delivered a statement that made my skin prick. He painted a picture of a misunderstanding, a man overwhelmed by accusations, a family torn apart by discord, a mother acting out of grief, not evidence. But the script faltered when he asked his first witness, one of Lucas's former co-workers. "I never saw him act like that," the man had said initially. "Not ever?" the lawyer pressed. "Not like what she described," he repeated, "but there were moments, small things that didn't make sense." Denise had already anticipated this. She stood and asked the first man if he'd seen Lucas push boundaries, social, professional, personal. Slowly, the witness nodded. "Yes," he admitted, "he could be controlling, not overtly, but consistently." That one slip was all it took. The calm was gone. The mask cracked just enough to let something very real and very dark peek through. Then it was Alana's turn. She stood, wearing confidence like armor. "Love isn't supposed to hurt," she said plainly. "It's not supposed to isolate you from your friends, your family, your sense of yourself." She described it all not in anger, but in clarity. The threats, the control, the voicemail where Lucas had boasted about calling the DA, about burying us quietly. The fear was in her voice, but not a trembling fear, more like a fire that had burned away the old versions of herself until only truth remained. By the time she finished, you could almost hear a pin drop. The jurors scribbled notes. The judge looked unwavering. There was no hysteria, just testimony, facts, chronology, and the weight of truth unfolding steadily before them. When all the witnesses were called and the final arguments delivered, the judge instructed the jury to deliberate. And then, we waited. Hours later, they returned. I could feel the tension in the room like static before a storm breaks. The foreperson stood. "We find the defendant guilty on both counts." The words echoed in the chamber like they carried weight far beyond those precise legal terms. Alana exhaled, her shoulders loosening for the first time in months. I felt a release in my chest like a knot untangling itself thread by thread. When we stepped out of the courthouse, the sun was lower in the sky, warm amber light that felt like absolution. Pastor Louis was waiting on the steps. "You did it," he said, voice steady but soft. "We did it," I corrected. Alana leaned against me for a moment, not collapsing, but grounding herself. "I feel free," she whispered. "No," I said with a soft smile. "You are free." And for the first time in a very long journey, we walked together into a future without fear. The day started with sunlight so bright it felt like truth itself had risen earlier than usual. I woke before dawn, not because I was restless, but because instinct told me this wasn't an ordinary morning. The final hearing. The end game. The moment all those years of preparation led us to. I stood at the back porch with my coffee, a ritual by now, and watched the sky lighten. Wispy clouds drifted free, unburdened. I thought of how long it had taken us to find that same freedom. Inside, Alana was preparing slow and steady, a quiet strength emanating from her. She moved with intention, her face calm yet purposeful. I saw that look and thought of how far she'd come from fear and silence to courage and voice. I hugged her before we left. "You ready?" I asked. She smiled, small, determined. "I am," she said. We arrived at the courthouse just as the sun was cresting over the horizon. Reporters and cameras waited, not in a frenzy like before, but with steady respect. The community had turned out, not just for us, but for what this final hearing represented: justice that stood on truth and collective courage. Pastor Louis, Teresa, Denise, and a small group of survivors who'd shared their stories stood behind us, shoulder to shoulder. It felt like walking into church, not trial, like family over formalities, like solidarity over fear. The judge called the court to order. Today wasn't about preliminary motions or evidence validation. Today was the final adjudication, the culmination of truth, testimony, and consequences for actions that sought to destroy, intimidate, and control. Denise stood first. "Your Honor, members of the court," she began. "This case represents not just incidents of forced entry and harassment, but a calculated pattern of coercion and abuse that culminated in an attack on my client's property and peace of mind. The evidence, as presented in prior hearings, unequivocally demonstrates intent, escalation, and danger to the safety of Miss Matthews and Miss Whitaker." She laid out the timeline once more. The recordings, the threats, the break-in, the testimonies all woven together into a narrative of deliberate intimidation. Each piece wasn't random. Each piece was a part of a story we'd spent years documenting. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, looked the judge directly in the eye, and spoke not as a victim, but as a witness to truth. "Your Honor, I am not here to ask for punishment out of vengeance," I said, voice steady. "I am here to make sure that no one else has to live under the fear we lived under. Abuse is not always visible. Control is not always loud. Sometimes it's subtle, quiet, like a shadow that moves beside you until one day you wake up and realize it's been shaping your life." I paused. I've seen women wrapped in silence, thinking that speaking up means losing everything. But the hardest truth I learned, especially as a mother who wanted to protect her daughter, is that silence is not safety. Truth is. The courtroom was still. Not cold, just attentive. Then Alana spoke. She carried her strength like someone who learned to own her story without apology. "Love should not limit you," she said. "Love should not isolate you. Love should not make you small. What I experienced was not love. It was control disguised as affection. It was fear dressed as protection. And now I stand here not just for me, but for every woman who thinks fear is love. Her voice didn't tremble not once. I looked at her and felt something profound. She was free, not just from Lucas, but from the fear that once lived in her bones. Then the defense rose. Lucas's lawyer spoke words polished, arguments calculated, tactics untouched by conscience. He called our story exaggerated, emotional, inconsistent. He tried to reduce truth to drama, pain to narrative, justice to spectacle. But by then, no one in that courtroom was buying doubt. Not the judge, not the jury, not the community. We had built a fortress of facts, supported by testimony, bolstered by collective voices. When closing arguments ended, the jury left to deliberate. It felt eerily like waiting at the edge of a dawn that would decide an ending one way or another. Time stretched. The judge called them back. And then the words, "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." The room exhaled, not in relief alone, but in recognition of truth upheld. Alana wrapped her arms around me. Her tears this time were gentle, not grieving, but healing. After we stepped outside, people gathered around us. Pastor Louis, Teresa, survivors, neighbors, advocates. They didn't hug us out of pity. They hugged us out of solidarity, because what we had faced wasn't just ours. It was a collective fight for dignity and justice. Reporters asked questions, but what struck me wasn't the cameras or the microphones. It was the faces in the crowd. The women who whispered, "Thank you," and "You gave me bravery." And I realized that this final verdict wasn't just a conclusion. It was a beginning. Later that afternoon, we returned home. The shed, once a fortress, then a battlefield, stood solid in the sunlight. I walked to it and placed a hand on the weathered wood. Not as something that held pain, but as something that had held truth. Inside, we didn't need the safe anymore. The documents, recordings, memories, they were no longer hidden. They were part of a history that was now shared, witnessed, acknowledged. "Want to open it one last time?" Alana asked gently as she came up behind me. I smiled. "Yes," I said. We turned the lock together. The door opened with a soft groan as though the shed itself was breathing after years of silence. Inside were boxes labeled with dates, notes, names, moments of fear, hope, despair, courage. We didn't take everything out. We just stood there, two women who had walked through life and pain and come out on the other side with truth intact. And then we closed the door. Not for hiding, but because we no longer needed to protect anything from the darkness. We had stepped into the light. The story of Gloria and Alana is a powerful reminder that silence is not safety. Abuse often hides in the shadows of doubt and fear, but truth, once spoken, has the power to break even the most oppressive chains. Their journey teaches us that healing begins when we find the courage to speak, to stand, and to protect what's right even when it's uncomfortable. Justice isn't always loud or swift, but with persistence and community, it can prevail. Most of all, it shows that no one is ever truly alone, and that reclaiming your voice is the first step toward reclaiming your life.